we consider Mary, we want to consider her as mother of Christ. Most people don't, Christians don't usually have any kind of a hang-up about that. You'd have to be an odd Christian for that to be an issue. Mother of the church. Well, you might find a few more who might struggle with that. Mother of God. Now, does that present any problems in your logic pattern? Okay, let me present the problem then. Okay. God has always existed. How could he have a mother? Aren't mothers older? Don't they pre-exist? Now, I'm coming at it from very human terms here. So, Mother of God was a pretty big argument in the early centuries of the church. Is Mary really the mother of God? They knew she was the mother of Christ, and they tried to split it out like, well, she's the mother of the human side. His human mother, but human only. No. Because you can't split Jesus down the middle. He's not who he was. He's both God and man. We'll talk about that a little bit tonight. In order to be both God and man, we can't split him in half. It doesn't work anymore. Okay. How about mother of us? Okay. So let me ask, how many of you have a rich sense of Mary being your mother? How many would say yeah, I do too. Can I ask if anybody would be willing to share, at what moment did you begin to realize that? Now, I've known people in all ages of the spectrum who came to that conclusion. Yeah.
I guess when I came to understand Christ's last words,
Okay.
He gave her to us as his mother.
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful. It really is. Anybody else? Different story.
I think it was when I lost my mom. I was 25, and it's like, you know, it helps you get through there. It's like, well, I have another mother.
Yes. I remember that. I lost my mother. She died when I was about 30. So like you, and I wasn't an orphan
Right.
because of her. Now, my understanding and appreciation of that has grown since that time quite a lot. But yeah, and do any of you know who Mary Jo Copeland is? Famous for sharing caring hands, Mary's Place. She developed a deep devotion to Mary as a child. You probably know the story if you're learning about her. She came out of an utterly dysfunctional home. She really did. Her father went off to World War II, came back with certainly PTSD, and drank in order to deal with it. And he was apparently a very mean drunk. He was very harsh. And Mary, who was taught by nuns who had a rich devotion to her, helped share this with her, and it became the root of her spiritual life. And if you think of her remarkable life, she had 11 kids, give or take, I may be off by one, and raised them all, and then decided, okay, it's time for me to start a soup kitchen. And that grew into the largest facility of the type in the state. And they don't take any government money. It's a remarkable story what they've done. So Mary as mother is kind of a theme we need to develop here. Now, a few broad things. This is the fulfillment, Mary is the fulfillment of Genesis 3. Now, what happened in Genesis chapter 3? You remember, what's that all about? The fall. We fell into sin. And all about Adam and Eve and getting tempted by the devil and eating the apple and all of that stuff, right? There's a moment in there where the Savior is promised, but it's promised in kind of interesting language, you know. It's talked about the offspring of she, if you will. You will strike, in other words, the serpent, you will strike at the heel. Her offspring will strike at your head. In other words, it's going to be more powerful. Christ, okay? So it's forecast there. She is virgin and mother. Now, does anything rub a little funny there? Yeah, well, there's a bit of a paradox here, right? You know, motherhood, if we think of it in sexual language, motherhood doesn't happen to virgins in the literal sense. But it did here. She's going to be both. And this was forecast in the Old Testament. Okay. And finally, we'll spend a little time on the incarnation here, not trying to get into other subjects, but so that Jesus Christ could be truly God and truly man, that didn't just come out of thin air. He has a human mother and a divine father. Okay, so we'll try to develop those things a little bit tonight. All right. Okay, so we have this moment called the Annunciation. Okay, any regular rosary prayers in here? I suspect we've got at least a few. Okay, great. What's the Annunciation?
Angel Gabriel came to Mary and announced the good news that she would have a child.
Yeah, now, this is where, you did that very well, Jennifer. Perfect. But this is where we're going to try to develop something that happened in here, okay? Now, the ladies in here could probably appreciate this better than the guys, but let's imagine you're approached at about age 15. That's the best guess we have. Go back to your 15-year-old days. And you're told you're going to be a mother. Not by the conventional means. How many questions might you have? 100? Maybe to get started. So this was going to be something very different. And that begins to get into the very nature of Mary herself. Okay. Now, one of the things I'm going to do, everything I'm going to talk about tonight, because nothing originates in my mind. It's all from the compendium, the catechism, other things. But there's a particular book I'm going to recommend to you, and it's an old book. It's been reprinted. It was first written in 1952 by Bishop Sheen, famous evangelist earlier in the 20th century. He would be the most famous Catholic evangelist probably in American history, although this is becoming a common thing to go through media. Has anybody ever seen his television show? Okay, it's still out there on EWTN and a few places, reruns and things like that. I've even seen it on Protestant stations on occasion. And the interesting thing about his show was, if you remember, he had a little blackboard. Most of it was in black and white. It wasn't until the later years it got into color. And it was just he and a blackboard, and he talked. And he actually won an Emmy. There's a scene of him in the 50s up with all these Hollywood stars, all the ones who had won Emmys, and he won an Emmy. And again, talk about high tech, a blackboard. That's what he had. A great teacher. Look, this book is about Mary. It's the best book on Mary I've ever read, anyway. I'm sure there may be others out there that are really good. But it's called The World's First Love. Okay? And I'll quote, and anytime it's in purple tonight, it's a quote from this book, just in case I forget. Okay, the Annunciation hasn't happened yet, but it's about to. Let's set the stage. The visit of the angel Gabriel to Mary is called the Annunciation because it announced the first really good news the earth had heard in centuries. Millennia, we could go on. Yesterday's news was about the fall of man through a woman. Today's news is about the regeneration of man through a woman. Okay? All right, Jennifer, I'm going to put you on the spot. And of course, scriptural translations vary on this. Do you remember the first words of the angel when he appeared to her in Nazareth? Do you need help?
Hail, full of grace.
Hail, full of grace is probably the most common translation you'll hear. Okay. Let's break that down for a minute. Hail, full of grace. All right, what's grace? Let's break this famous phrase apart.
Divine life.
Divine life in us. Okay? Okay? Divine life in us. Is that a good thing? Yeah, that's really good. Okay. God's life in us. It's powerful. All right? We're divinized by it. Hail Mary, or hail full of grace. So let's say I say, you're full of grace. Now, have you ever been called full of it, maybe by your siblings growing up, or, and we won't say what it is, but when they say you're full, what does it mean?
No room for anything else.
Completely. You're nothing but grace. Wow. That's a powerful statement. When we say full, let's imagine you have the finest wine you could ever taste. And the glass is filled right to the very rim. It's full of wonderful wine. It's full. You can't put anything else in there. You can't add to it. Okay? She's full of grace. Now, this is the angel approaching her. An angel salutes a woman. Does that sound like a little contradiction? Yeah. Let's move on here a little bit.
May I add something?
Yes, by all means.
It was not a guardian angel, it was an archangel. on
An
top of it.
archangel. Yeah, this is not your run-of-the-mill angel. Although my guardian angel, I think,
Right, it
is
was
earning his
An archangel.
archangel wings. Keeping me out of trouble. Spend a little time on art here. Now, I'm about as qualified to judge art as I am to be a fashion consultant. Not at all. Okay, so Angel Gabriel, Mary. Okay. Now this is from, and I don't know a lot about art, but this is from a fresco, apparently in a monastery is what I understand. I can't recall who the author was. I don't know if they know. Look at the two figures in this painting. Anything strike you? Those of you who probably have a deeper appreciation of art than I do. Julia.
Mary is higher than the angel, and also kind of the halo around her head is bigger than his.
Very good. Wow, hit that one over the fence. Yeah, Mary's taller. Notice they even have the bars that are connecting. Kind of sets this up. If you looked at them without that bar, you might not pick up on that. But yeah, Mary is the loftier. And her halo is larger. These halos that we found in certain centuries of art. You see the Last Supper, and 11 of the apostles have halos, right? And there's this one guy without. Well, you pretty well, my grandchildren, even the little ones, they're 6 or something, getting ready for the first communion. Yeah, did you know Judas didn't have a halo? Yeah, okay. All right. He could have. He blew it, Even here, some other things in this painting, or fresco, I guess, not really a painting. Okay, Bertie, I know you know building, I know you've helped Father when they built all this addition on. What do you call, at the top of a column, what do you call these capitals? Or what's at the top of the column? It's escaping me, I used to know. It doesn't, okay. We'll call them capitals. I don't know, I could be dead wrong. Notice they're fancy along here, and then they're plain back here. Those capitals are pointing. In other words, the more ornate those are, the more significant. And this is sort of to Mary's side, and a little less so to the angel's side. They even talk about the wooden fence back here. 3 nails in it. Points to the crucifix. Again, artists, or good artists anyway, are constantly weaving this stuff in. So the Annunciation is this key moment in history. So Jennifer did an almost perfect job of describing what happened at the Annunciation. And I think the Annunciation, the title takes something key away from it. Did the angel tell her or something else?
She asked for it.
Asked her. Okay? The This is a request, okay? Again, God never forces his way. So, greetings, favored one. That's one of the translations. I happen to be using a certain one here. Translated full of grace. The Lord is with you. Now, this is coming from an archangel, okay? Good source. Do not be, and then he goes on. Now, Mary is troubled, I think some translations will say. You know, like, how can this be? Yeah. Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God. You will conceive a son and will name him Jesus, and of his kingdom there will be no end. He's going to be the King of Kings, using their language. Now, what is Mary's only question? Julia.
How will this happen when I'm a virgin?
Yeah, how can this be? I do not know man. This is probably one of the common translations. The angel answers her. The Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. I think that language is only used twice in all of Scripture. For nothing is impossible with God. So this is not going to be your typical conception. This is going to be something else. Is this the Immaculate Conception?
No.
No. A lot of people think, oh yeah, this is the Immaculate. No, this is not it. Mary was conceived immaculately, okay? Now, how many of you don't know what that means? How many am I speaking Greek? Feel free if you don't know. Immaculate Conception, okay? Thank you. Be a brave one, stick the hand. I appreciate that. Mary was conceived without original sin. Is that a pretty good deal?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. Very good deal. Why? Why would she be conceived without original sin?
There's only a clean vessel will accept the Lord.
Yeah. Now we can use that. Mary is pure. Now, isn't that also what virgin also means? How many of you buy unpure virgin olive oil? I don't think you could sell it, could you? You know. Now, what does it mean to be pure?
Unblemished.
Unblemished? Yes. Let's go further.
Like
What's
free of sin?
free of anything else? In other words, pure virgin olive oil, if it's being sold truly, is just olive oil. There's nothing else in there. Okay, I remember as a kid growing up with Ivory soap, and they had a line on this. I always remember this. It's 99 and 44 100% pure soap. Nothing else. Okay. Now I don't know how they got 44 100s. I never figured that part out in the measurement, but they did. Pure. In other words, it's only this. So let's say Madison just got married a week ago, and you had a solid gold heavy ring on. Solid gold. Okay? Pure gold, nothing else. Okay? That'd be worth a little bit today, wouldn't it? Yeah. Okay. All right. So pure means totally one thing. And that's what Mary is. Totally devoted to God. From the very beginning. There's nothing else in there. There's no fallenness and so forth. Okay? Another theological question. Does anybody know how did this happen? How did Mary end up free from original sin, where the rest of us, you know, the chopped liver here, how come we didn't get this deal? How did God do this?
It was the merits of Jesus, the merits of Jesus' passion that were
Passion, death, and resurrection
that were
applied to Mary
beforehand.
before
Before.
conception. Okay. Does anybody know of anybody else nobody else has this distinction? Does anybody know of any other people who've had a distinction somewhat like this? John the Baptist. We're going to get to him in a little bit. John the Baptist was not conceived without original sin. but he was born without it. Is his role pretty high? Very, very. There's another saint who was given a sort of partial gift to this, Thomas Aquinas. He was placed in a situation of great temptation, and he resisted it. And it was said, almost by acclamation, that he was given the gift of concupiscence. Okay? Or to get rid of concupiscence, I should say. Concupiscence is those unruly passions we have, part of the fall. None of you have ever gotten in trouble because your emotions haven't? Yes.
Wait, was this a story where he threw himself, or was this someone else? They like threw themselves in like this like thorny bush because they were having unpure thoughts?
I think you're thinking of somebody else, I think, but I can't recall who that is. You know,
St. Francis?
might have been.
I thought
Might
it
have
was
been.
Saint, one of the desert.
Desert Fathers, perhaps?
Saint Anthony.
Could be.
Yeah.
I can think of a number who might qualify.
Yeah.
Yeah. But Thomas Aquinas, it was said from that moment on, had an absolutely clear mind and no unruly passions. Now, if you've ever read any of Aquinas, you're going to say, okay, this fits. And that's why he was a particular gift to the church. Okay.
What about Adam and Eve?
What about, okay, you know, you're getting, okay, good call though. Adam and Eve would have been born without original sin. They committed it.
But they weren't really born. They were created.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, good technical point. Okay. They fell. Now, John Paul II, in his Theology of the Body, spent a lot of time developing this before the fall, original innocence of Adam and Eve, and what it was like after the fall, where it's, you know, historical man kind of collapsed into sin. Okay? And I'm sure as we get into morality, we'll talk about that, you know, but how many of you have ever felt you're your own worst enemy? St. Paul describes that wonderfully in Romans 7. If you ever get frustrated with yourself, go read Romans 7. St. Paul, pretty lofty guy, felt the same way. I do not do what I want, but I do what I hate. Yep. Gosh, does that remind me of me? Okay. So, let it be done to me according to your word. That's Mary's consent. That's once she had this one question answered, okay, this is going to be done by the power of the Holy Spirit. Okay. Let it be done to me according to your word. Okay, that is Mary's fiat, her faith. She accepted this very mysterious life on faith. Sheen described it this way in his book: when freedom and love were one. At that moment, Mary, with total freedom, accepted this out of her complete love for God. It's the way we're all supposed to be.
John, I have a question.
Yes.
I'd never heard that before about John the Baptist, that he was not, how did you say it? He wasn't conceived without sin, but he was born
without the effects of original sin. We're going to get to that in a moment. If you
Okay.
can, maybe, but if I don't answer it or I miss it, please bring it up.
Okay.
It's a good question. All right. So, those of you who are rosary prayers, the first joyful mystery. By the way, for those of you who've never said a rosary, that's fine. What do you do when you say a rosary properly? What's the idea? Now, you never get distracted when you pray. Any of you ever get distracted? Mind goes 1,000 places? Sure, that's normal. Please don't get sweaty about that. What's the second joyful mystery?
Visitation.
The visitation. Okay, so now we got to set the stage for the visitation. Okay. Mary is told, you're going to be the mother of God. The Holy Spirit is going to come upon you, and you are going to bring God into humanity. Okay. How are you going to explain this around the water cooler, around the neighborhood? You know, who are you going to talk to about this? You know, who's your peer in this? Now remember, at the Annunciation, the angel was going to explain to her, your cousin Elizabeth, husband is Zachariah, who is way beyond childbearing years and never had a child, is now in her 6th month, for nothing is impossible with God. Now, if you study the Old Testament, by the way, you find a number of these where women who have no chance of having children, which was the one who the angel told her, yeah, I'll be back in a year and you'll be pregnant.
The mother of
Sarah.
Samuel.
Abraham.
The
Yeah,
mother of
may have been
Samuel.
both, but one of them even laughed at him.
Yes.
Laughed at like, no, you're not. No, I'm not. It's not gonna, yeah, you are.
Yeah.
And lo and behold,
That was-
she does.
Anna.
Okay.
Sarah.
Again, my memory is so poor, I forget which
Anna.
one.
Sarah. Anna.
Sarah.
There's Sarah, but also Anna, when
Could
she
be.
was talking and they thought she was.
I'm not gonna argue with it because I'm not sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is, there's a number of occasions where totally unexpected conceptions happen. Okay. So, we have the Annunciation, and right after that, we have the hint of the visitation. What does Mary do? Okay. She heads to visit her cousin Elizabeth, who's in her 6th month and is elderly, in haste. In other words, moved right away. In other words, this love of Mary, this deep love she has, and now I think there, I'm not saying there's a selfish motive here. Mary didn't have a selfish bone in her body. But there had to be a benefit of her going to Elizabeth, who had just experienced conception when it was impossible by any human standards. Okay. She gets there, and now we're getting to when John the Baptist was freed from original sin again by having Christ's merits applied to him prematurely. What happened when the two encountered each other?
John the Baptist leaped in
Yeah.
Elizabeth's womb.
John leaped in her womb. Okay. And then this prayer really comes out of Scripture, and it kind of captures the dialogue between Mary and Elizabeth. My soul proclaims the greatness of the Lord. This is Mary speaking. My spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has looked with favor on his lowly servant. Now, to those of you who've wondered about Catholics and Mary, does it sound like we consider her lowly? No. And yet we do. What do you think was one of the great virtues she had, which for any of us, this is the key fundamental virtue?
Humility.
Humility. Okay? Humility. Opposite of pride. Pride, it's all about us. Mary? She's an uneducated maiden from Nazareth, kind of a know-nothing town. From this day, all generations will call me blessed. She's kind of almost shocked at this, but she knows. She understands. The Almighty has done great things for me, and holy is his name. None of it is about her. It's all about him. He has shown the strength of his arm. Oh, he has mercy on those who fear him in every generation. Now, what kind of fear are we talking about here?
Maybe more of a, respect?
Yeah, even go further than that, a fear of love. Okay? Do you want to offend the beloved? No. No. You fear that. You don't want to offend your beloved. Okay? He has shown the strength of his arm. He has scattered the proud in their conceit. He has cast down the mighty from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has filled the hungry with good things, and the rich he has sent away empty. We get this contrast between humility and pride here in all its dimensions. He has come to the help of his servant Israel. Remember, Israel, the chosen people. Okay? Have any of you ever seen the play or the movie Fiddler on the Roof? Okay? It's a great thing. Very spiritual. Tevye is always talking to God, you know, which is kind of how we ought to be living. Do you remember what he said about the chosen? Tevye? Couldn't you have chosen someone else? You know, right? If you remember that line in there. Because when God chooses you, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. God was going to work through this people to bring salvation to all of us. That's salvation history. And so, he has come to the help of his servant Israel, for he has remembered his promise of mercy, the promise he made to our fathers, to Abraham and his children forever. Again, this salvation has been promised since way back in Genesis 3, if we want to look at it scripturally. And it's being fulfilled in their midst at this time. They know it's finally happening. If any of you have watched any of The Chosen, you know, one of the things that makes the apostles almost giddy is they've been praying to this God for all these years and perhaps frustrated, and being Jewish is tough. You got 600 and some laws you got to follow. You got to do all these crazy things. And that Messiah we've been talking about and thinking about and praying to, he's here. They're giddy about that. Okay? All right. So what is happening here? Elizabeth is pregnant with John the Baptist, the herald. Technically the last of the Old Testament prophets and the greatest. John lived a very interesting life. Many thought he might be the Messiah. He said, "Oh no, I'm not fit to fasten his sandal straps. One is coming who will not be baptizing you with water, but be baptizing you in the Spirit." Okay, that's real baptism, sacrament. Zechariah, during this time, we should mention, by the way, he was the high priest. He went into the Holy of Holies. They do this one day a year on the Day of Atonement. The high priest goes into the Holy of Holies. Do you know what the Holy of Holies is? Just quick, whether it was in the temple or whether it was in the tent. The Holy of Holies is the most sacred place of Israel in the ancient world. Okay, this is where God dwelt. Okay, this is where the Ark of the Covenant would be. Why did they call it the Holy of Holies, by the way? Why didn't they just call it the holiest? That's a little quirk of the Hebrew language. I don't understand languages very well. They have no superlative in Hebrew. So when they say the Holy of Holies, that's how they would say it. It'd be like the fast of the fast would be the fastest. Okay, that's how they get there. Yes.
So is that represented in our tabernacle?
Yes.
That's the Holy of Holies.
In a way, yes. Now we have a different sense of it because if you want to read some good stuff, we were talking about it before class. Have any of you read or watched Brent Petrie through Formed, or he's got a book on the Jewish roots of the Eucharist? If you've not read that, it's a good one to do someday. It goes into how this was foreshadowed in the Old Testament and then now is fully present in Christ. But good question, yes. So everything is coming here now. It's the moment, okay? As we recall Christ coming at Christmas, this is what we're recalling and looking forward to his second coming at the end of time. Okay. So far we pretty good? Okay. All right, so let's look at Mary's motherhood then in regard not just to Christ, but to the church, which is us. Okay? How could she be our mother? Well, Mary, as the Catechism says, Mary's role in the church is inseparable from her union with Christ and flows directly from it. Don't try to separate what Mary does and what Christ does. You're going to get into difficulty, okay? What makes her so important, what makes her so lofty, is precisely this role she was given. Now, how many of you would like to have had her role? Now, maybe when you were a child, you might have imagined that. But being people of anywhere from young adults to my age, you'd think twice about wanting to take this role on. Because where does this role sort of end?
Foot of the cross.
At the foot of the cross. This is a tough one, okay? It's not going to be an easy one. The union of the mother with the son is the work of salvation made manifest from the time of Christ's virginal conception up to his death. The whole pattern of that is it's not just simply conceived and give birth, it's the whole enchilada, the whole process of Christ's salvific action. Thus, the Blessed Virgin advanced in her pilgrimage of faith and faithfully persevered in her union with her Son unto the cross. She's there. Not many were. Several Marys. John was there. He had run away, though, earlier. Let's be honest. He came back. Finally, the Immaculate Virgin, preserved free from all stain of original sin, when the course of her earthly life was finished, was taken up body and soul into heavenly glory and exalted by the Lord as queen over all things, so that she might be more fully conformed to her Son, the Lord of lords and conqueror of sin and death. Okay, some of you who are cradle Catholics, particularly with some age, what are some of Mary's titles you've heard? Anybody?
Queen of heaven.
Queen of heaven,
Angels, Queen of Saints.
Queen of angels, Queen of saints,
Refuge of sinners.
refuge of sinners, morning star,
Star of the Sea.
star of the sea,
New Eve.
Ark of the Covenant.
New Eve.
new Eve, yes, very important.
And the Ark.
Our Lady of Sorrows, thank you. Okay? Our Lady of Sorrows. Yeah, we always tend to think of the glory of Mary, and that's where we confuse her. Yes, certainly, but tough life. Not easy. Not easy at all. Yeah. From a Byzantine liturgical prayer, how many of you are familiar with the rites, R-I-T-E-S, of the Catholic Church? Or at least aware that we have many of them? Okay. I think there are 26 rites of the Catholic Church, and one of them is Byzantine. Okay? Now, those that are fully united with Rome are considered fully part of it. In the Twin Cities here, we have several churches that are not Roman Catholic. We have St. Marin's is probably the most famous around here. It's a Maronite rite located in northeast Minneapolis. Another one in northeast Minneapolis. They seem to have a lot of these there. The Byzantine Ruthenian rite. I've been to Mass there a couple times. And they celebrate the Mass a little bit differently, although it's essentially the same. This is from one of the Byzantine liturgical prayers. In giving birth, you kept your virginity. Again, this paradoxical situation. In your dormition. Now, what does dormition mean? Sleep. Yeah. The sense is that Mary, because she was not born with original sin, would not die. So that at the end of her earthly life, for lack of a better term, she didn't die. She went to sleep and was taken into heaven, which would be totally appropriate to her circumstance. Okay?
John, is
Yes.
that because death is a result of original sin?
Yes.
Death came through sin?
Yeah. So if original sin never happened, yeah, we would not die. We would not get sick. We would not get tired.
We would not work.
What's that?
We would not work.
Actually, we would. We would not toil, however.
Toil, that's right.
Yeah, there's that distinction. Think of it this way. Anybody have a frustrating day at work today? Okay, what do you do?
Project manager.
Okay. And I would imagine a job like that has moments of great delight. And, oh my gosh, how are we gonna get this done? And somebody drops the ball, the key person you needed is sick with the flu, you know, whatever goes on. Maybe I'm describing what you're dealing with, okay. Now, we've all been there, okay? So what was I talking about that for? Okay. It doesn't go, that's the toil of it. Most of us actually enjoy work. You ever heard the lottery? I remember first time I got presented this was in a master's class in theology. And the question was presented to us. If I could give you the winning lottery numbers for one of those billion-dollar lotteries out there, but here was the catch. In order for me to give you those numbers, you can never work in any way, shape, or form again. He said, I want you to take a few seconds to think about this. Would you take it? I would not. Why? Because everything we do is in a way work. Okay? We're made to work, not for work, but we're made to work because work develops us, it's what fulfills us. And I don't by that always mean employed work. Okay? Today, if it is as you described, you may have wanted to head out the door at noon, get out of this place, take this job and shove it, so to speak. But think of, I spent this afternoon holding my 11-month-old granddaughter and giving her a nap. I haven't done that in a few weeks because my wife had surgery and so forth, so we haven't done that. But for the first time today, I did again. Oh, what slave labor I've been doing. It was delightful. I caught a few Z's in there myself, fantastic. All right. So the idea here is that work would not have that element of toil. Okay? Work's very fulfilling for the most part. But the element of toil makes it miserable. When your coworker goes nuts, when the person on the other side of the cubicle wall is going bananas, when your boss makes unreasonable demands, when you're not feeling good, yeah, it's toil. Or when something you just can't seem to figure out how we're going to do this. That's toil. That's tough. That's hard. Okay. But good one. Okay, so all these things would not be part of life if sin were not in the world, because sin is the disorder. Okay? How soon does the project do, if I can ask?
Oh, too soon.
Too soon, yeah. Can't get, no way we're gonna get, you probably will pull it off. Maybe not quite on time. I suspect any number of you have been in the same situation and, somehow by the grace of God and the midnight oil and whatever else you did, you got through it. You ever go by a college campus the last 2 weeks? More work gets done in the last 2 weeks of the semester than does in the other 13, The midnight oil is burning, the coffee pots are going, yeah, okay. Not a good way to approach college, but under pressure we can do a lot, okay. You conceive the living God, and by your prayers will deliver our souls from death. Okay. Those of you who are mothers, particularly if you're a mother of several generations, those of you who are grandmothers or grandfathers, do you pray for those kids?
Oh, yes.
Has it gotten less intense, your prayer, or more intense with age?
More intense.
More intense.
More intense. Because there's just more to pray about, isn't there? Okay. Yeah. It just is. This is motherhood or fatherhood. This is what you do. Mary's work continues in the heavenly okay, sorry, I can't read it at the angle I'm at. What is it? To exercise her maternal role on behalf of the members of Christ. Members of Christ, what do we mean by that? Twofold layers of similar meaning. It's us. We are the members, the arms and legs of Christ in the world. Okay? We're the church that way. And she is constantly acting on our behalf. Okay? Hence, we pray to her. It's an ongoing thing. It's not a moment in time where she really shone. It's an ongoing. So who brought up Mother of Sorrows?
Mary.
Okay. You're familiar with her apparition at La Salette? Which was Our Lady of
Yes.
Sorrows. Okay. Now, I don't know a lot about that particular apparition. The only reason I know about it was attending a Catholic high school. We used to play La Salette Seminary in basketball, and they had that statue out in front every time I went there. And it was nearby. I used to play summer ball there and stuff like that. And I always remember that statue very pronounced at the driveway as you entered into the campus. Our Lady of Sorrows. In other words, it's ongoing. There are reasons to be sorrowful in the world. Okay?
She appeared in tears
Yes.
in the Alps
Mm-hmm.
to, I think,
Okay.
two children.
Yes.
And she was very sad because people used the name of God in vain.
Mm-hmm.
They worked on Sundays, and I'm not too familiar with it either, but I know she was in tears when she appeared
Yes.
to these children.
Yeah.
And I've heard that if you go to La Salette, I went to La Lady of Lo, which is not too far from La Salette. It's like an hour drive, but it's much higher.
Okay.
It's still higher
It's
in the
even
Alps.
higher in the mountains? Okay.
Higher in the mountain than where Our Lady of Lo is, Refuge of Sinners.
Mhm.
And I've heard people who went there, it's very somber. The basilica is very austere, I guess.
Mhm.
It's not, yeah.
Yeah.
It's different from like when you go to Lourdes. I go to Lourdes a lot.
Okay.
And then here you experience Mary as a mother in
Mhm.
Lourdes. Really powerful.
Mhm.
It's very happy, joyful. We have the processions. Very.
And of course, Mary's sorrow is not a bad mood. You know, it's not that kind of thing. What is it that gives us genuine sorrow? When somebody has gone astray, when our children or our grandchildren go off the path, that's hard. You know, we could name all the things that causes sorrow. That's part of life, okay? It's part of life. Where we don't seek it, but it finds it. Okay. So let's move on here, respecting time. A tricky one here. Mary as mediatrix of all graces. How many of you have heard that phrase applied to Mary? Okay. How can that be? All right, let's start out. What do we mean by mediatrix? What term would we use? Mediator, right? Okay. Who is the one true full mediator of all grace? Christ. Okay. All grace comes through him. He's the primary mediator between God and man. He's the one who bridged the gap between fallen man and God. Because we had created a chasm there that couldn't be crossed easily. How mediatrix, the female side of that, how does that play in here? How could she be the mediatrix of all graces? Is she the prime mediator? No, that's Christ. But her yes, her fiat, her acceptance brought Christ into the world. God didn't force this. Okay, he didn't force it. He asked. She said yes. So, salvation is not Marian, but it flows through her in her role as mother. Okay? Mary's, and this is out of Lumen Gentium, articles 60 and 62. Mary's function as mother of men in no way obscures or diminishes this unique mediation of Christ. Christ is the one true, great, complete mediator, but rather shows its power. But the Blessed Virgin's salutary influence on men flows forth from the superabundance of the merits of Christ. It rests on his mediation, depends entirely on it, and draws its power from it. Okay, now I got a question. Are you, and even me, called to be mediators of Christ.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, absolutely. Now, theologically, some Protestant denominations will argue this, but I've never heard any one of them argue it seriously. They'll start arguing it, Christ is the only mediator. No. Why did Christ grab the 12 apostles? Because they were all such wonderful guys? You know? No. He relies on human mediation through us. I've done RCA, OCA for 25 years. I think I've helped about 300 people come into the church. What a privileged position. I've never had anyone who I got to know, and I've gotten to know most of the candidates at least moderately well, if not very well, who didn't come out of the influence of somebody in their lives. Could have been a neighbor, a coworker who was working with you and you're under all this stress and you're still so calm and serene. Right. You know, I know I'm shoveling probably pretty hard here now. Yeah, it's done that way. We are all called to be instruments of the salvation of others. Yes?
Father Brent said, the Lord loves the middleman.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. We're the middlemen. You know, we're not terribly important in the equation, but, you know, sometimes even in the stumblings of life, have you ever ended up being the middleman on something trivial just because you happened to be there? You know, and you became important. You know, I've known of people, I've not done this, where my wife had it happen one time where I needed a new exhaust system on the car. It was the middle of the winter. I wasn't going to fix it myself, which I usually tend to do. And I was in the middle of fixing my father-in-law's drains in his house. They were all messed up. And I was working on it, and it was going much worse. And I said, Cindy, any way you can get him out of the house? Because what I'm going to do next to fix this thing is going to scare him. He's very fussy, orderly kind of a guy. And I was going to make about 15 minutes of serious disorder in order to get this thing right. She said, yeah, well, how about if I go pick up the car? He just called and said it's done. I said, oh, great, go pick up the car. So she goes to the muffler shop, you know, of all places. And lo and behold, she's there. And the guy behind the counter has a seizure. And all the help is going nuts. They don't know what to do. They're screaming, yelling, cussing, and everything else. She just goes around the thing, goes back behind the counter, holds the guy who's sort of foaming at the mouth, tries to calm him down, settles him. That's all she did. And, you know, and then his brother came in. Apparently they'd called his brother. His brother got there. He said, look, if you hadn't done that, he could have died. You know, she got back. Man, help save someone's life. I said, I thought you were going to pick up the car. You know. And she says, oh, by the way, they said, we're not charging you for this. So we got a free muffler out of it. Okay, all right. Selfish. Oh, terribly selfish. Yeah, you know, in life, we're meant to be. We are meant to be that to each other. It's God's plan. He's working through others. So, okay. Let's move on here. We're going to get a little logical here for a minute. The incarnation, God becoming man, makes perfect sense, even though it seems to be kind of a contradiction. The God-man. The offense of the original sin was against God, right? Only God can be the forgiver of it as the one offended. Man committed the offense, so only man can carry out the act of restoration. Here's the problem. The offense was so great, that is the returning of God's love, man was not capable of it. There was no one around up to the task. And when we saw what the eventual task was, I think you can understand why. Just carry the whole sins of the world. Okay? I have a hard time carrying my own. Okay? Only an act of perfect obedience could restore the disobedience of God's love that happened with original sin. And let's not just blame it on Adam and Eve. Every sin we commit since kind of participates in that. We do the same thing. Only God is capable of a perfect act of obedience And that is by obedience. If you go into the Latin, obedience means hearing to the heart. Hearing it all the way through. What is it you really want? Okay? The gospel then is a call to our deepest longing, and that is communion with God made possible by Christ, the God-man. Man's realization of fulfillment is possible again. That's the good news of salvation. Okay? Now within this, a little bit of a repeat here of some stuff we may have covered, or Father may have covered. How God became man, the mysterious union of these two natures of Christ, which theological terms we call the hypostatic union, the union of two natures in one person. What he was, he remained. He's God. Human nature was assumed, in other words, taken on, not absorbed. Now, why did they put that phrase in there? Why would the Catechism specify that? Okay, Michelle, we're gonna make you God and woman in this case, okay? In the same being. Is the tendency to think the divine side is gonna totally overwhelm the human side? Yeah. It's given. But Jesus Christ was truly, fully, completely human. Completely. Still is. He possesses two natures, divine and human, in one person, Jesus Christ, Son of God, second person of the Blessed Trinity. Christ's human will does not resist or oppose, but rather submits to his divine and almighty will. Can any of you think of that happening very powerfully in Jesus' life, when his human will submitted to the divine will?
Agony.
The agony in the garden. Perfect. Yeah. Okay. He said, he had the problem. He was clairvoyant. He's God. He knows what tomorrow's going to be like. You think you're going to have a bad day tomorrow? Are you dreading going to work tomorrow?
It'll be okay.
It'll be okay. Okay. Can you imagine knowing what was going to happen to you tomorrow and, leading up to that? I mean, that'll make your day a piece of cake, right? Compared to this. Okay. So, but not my will, but thine be done. Can this cup pass? In other words, can we not do this? His human will, but your will be done. In order to fulfill his mission, he needed to be both true God and true man. Now, could God have saved us by a snap of the fingers? He could have. Wouldn't that have been a lot easier? A lot less complicated? But what would it be missing? Our personal participation in it. Okay. Kind of like, Bernie, you mentioned the work. Maybe it wasn't you, but we wouldn't have to work. No, we would. But participation in work is joyous. That bringing something to task, completing it. When this is over, maybe you can celebrate, whatever's going on on your project. This is what we're looking at, okay? God is calling for our participation. He's not going to save us against our will, okay? He doesn't operate that way. Always free. So again, we touched on this before, but by way of review. And I put a piece of art up in the corner that I called in class one time. This woodcut, I wish it was a little bit bigger. This is a famous carving of Adam, Eve, and Abel. Genesis 4, where the two of them are leaning up ostensibly against a tree. Some of the carvings even have that in the background. And their son is dead at their feet, and they know that, at least indirectly, it's their fault. And they're sort of looking at, staring off into space even a little bit away from each other. Very powerful piece. Nature in person. Nature is inherited and passed on, okay? In a certain sense, in Christ, we see this in ourselves, okay? How many of you have ever been to a big family reunion where you had all the generations and all that? Nobody? Okay, all right, good. Gosh, I thought all you guys are alienated. Okay. Do you ever find at a family reunion, you know, you kind of get off with all the other relatives, not your close ones, not the ones you see all the time. But then at some point, especially if it's an all-day event, you kind of circle back to your posse, your own, you know, your more immediate family. And I always remember one of my family reunions, we were at it, and it was on the Hartman side, my side. And got back, and one of my sisters looks at the other four of us and says, "Aren't you glad we didn't inherit the family nose?" We all just broke into laughter because a lot of slightly big noses in the family. We didn't seem to get that in our line for some reason. We were kind of normal noses. But yeah, a lot of them had the big ones. Okay, anyway. It's passed on, it's inherited. Nature, of course, is what something in other words, what are its properties? But we again go back to our personhood, whether we're thinking about Mary, whether we're thinking about Jesus, or whether we're thinking of ourselves or an angel. Person is who someone is. Okay? A person is a being with a mind and a will. Again, God, angels, us. Personhood distinguishes us from those who share our nature. Okay? We are all human, but we are all distinct. Mary as our mother. Now again, remember, I'm selling this book tonight. Okay? It's a great book, great read. We see here an icon. Now, if you've seen icons, and there are a lot of icons, these are common in the Eastern churches, kind of the Byzantine, the Orthodox, and so forth. Anybody here know more about icons than I do? I suspect somebody here probably does. Anybody know a bit about icons? Really? Okay, that's shocking to me. Usually, artistically, I'm pretty challenged, so. Icons are what? If you ever go to an Eastern church, or even some Western churches now, you see a lot of these. I hear St. Michael's in, St. Michael is, I haven't been there. The pastor's a friend of mine. I gotta get up there, but it's kind of a long drive on a Sunday. Is rich with these. But if I've gone to some Eastern Rite churches, and they're all over the place. The church is just loaded. What is an icon?
Isn't it like a window to God?
Yeah, a way to put it.
It's written rather than,
Painted, yeah, they always talk about writing them. That you don't paint them, although it's painting clearly from an artistic sense. But you write them, and there's prayers even associated with how you write them. And within them, they're beautiful, and they're rich, and there's a depth to them. We see this one here. Notice Mary's hand. Okay. Who's it pointing to? Jesus. Everything about Mary is going to Jesus. It all goes there. And in art, particularly in these, she's represented. And the hands in most icons, particularly of Mary pointing to Jesus, are exaggerated in size, a little bit disproportionate. In other words, see him, okay? The main ministry of Mary is to incline men's hearts to obedience to the will of her divine Son. Her last recorded words at Cana are still her words at the Assumption when she was taken up into heaven. Now, in the older translation, probably the Dewey Reams Bible, whatsoever he shall say to you, that do ye. In other words, do whatever he tells you. You remember where that came from? Where's that most famous?
The wedding at Cana.
The wedding feast of Cana. What was Jesus' response to that, by the way?
What is that to me, woman?
Yeah, what is this concern? You know, they've run out of wine. Yeah. What concern is this to me? He's almost there's a little edge there, you know? Now, what's his edge? Is he being cruel? No. Is he being dismissive of his mother? No. What's the edge there?
It's not yet his time.
Yeah. Or he's putting it maybe a subtly different way. If he does this, some people are going to know about it. You know, because there's people at that wedding that knew they had run out of wine. Okay? I thought The Chosen did a nice job with this, you know, too many guests. Jesus brought all the apostles, you know, okay, we just went 12 over the guest list. And of course, in the Middle East, hospitality is honor. And if you run short, it's a stain on your family. And so, you know what this means, Mom? If I do this, you know where this is heading. It's heading to my death. And by this point, it's very apparent that Mary knew that. You know, some people say, did Mary understand all this from the beginning? No. But it's very clear that along the way, she began to understand. Okay? Do whatever he tells you. Okay? That's the advice he's given to all of us. Do what he tells you, you're going to be fine. Okay. Let me shut this